What is up? I believe you're here for multi-cloud strategy, multi-cloud architecture. What is multi-cloud? So in today's episode, I've got David Linthicum, who is a Chief Cloud Strategy Officer for Delloite. I am lost for words to talk about the credentials that David has. He has written a lot of books, has a lot of courses on lynja.com, and he is also writing articles for InfoWorld. He was ranked the cloud influencer of the year as well. So yes, he definitely comes with the right credentials to talk about multi-cloud. In this episode, we also go into what does multi-cloud mean when you're starting today versus if you're already in multi-cloud, how do you have a common set of services to make sure you have success in multi-cloud? That and a lot more. If you enjoy this article, leave a comment, subscribe so that you find out about the next episode, or you can head to www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv to know more about the previous episodes or share any blogs or reach out to us for any training. All right, let's get into the episode. Welcome to Cloud Security Podcast. Today, my guest is David Linthicum. Well, where do I start about David Linthicum? If you were to read just his bio, he's an author for more than 13 books with 5,000 articles. He's appeared on InfoWorld, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, NPR, and I can just keep going on. But I don't feel I would do enough justice to David. So welcome, David. And would you be able to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, number one, thanks for having me. Dave Linthicum. I'm actually the Chief Cloud Strategy Officer for Delloite. Been there for a couple of years. Prior to that, I was with Cloud Technology Partners. Was there for about 5 years. That was sold to HP a few years ago. Then prior to that, many jobs as a CTO or a CEO of several different either startups or enterprise companies, and most of those were sold. And just love technology and just kind of look at what's next and just kind of thrive on inventing and being innovative around new things. So that's why I love doing the thought leadership stuff, and I love doing things like this because it does allow me to interact with smart people like yourself.
Oh, thank you. My first question usually on this podcast is, what does cloud security mean for you?
Well, it means keeping my clients employed because they mess that up and it's not going to work. Well, cloud security is really has very similar patterns that we had with enterprise security. However, there is new innovative technology in the stack that's starting to appear, which means we have to leverage both traditional features like encryption and identity access management and advanced features, multi-factor authentication, bioauthentication, things like that. And so really, when you think of cloud security, you have the opportunity to kind of take security to the next level. In fact, I always have this conversation with my clients. Your system is going to be more secure in the cloud than it is on premise typically, because the security technology in the cloud has been looked after for the last 5 years, where the security stuff that's been on premise has not. It's been, legacy stuff. A lot of the stuff has been sunsetted. And so when I actually looked at the R&D budgets of the security providers out there, they're spending 75% of their R&D budgets on retooling for the cloud. And so they're putting all their innovation and effort into building security systems that are going to work in the cloud. So when I think of cloud-based security, I think of the opportunity to kind of take your security systems to the next level. Of course, you have to get around the fact that everybody's kind of freaked out about their data not physically existing in a data center premise, and it has to exist in a cloud that you have to trust people to run. Yep. But the thing is, that model is actually more effective because you're able to defend things centrally. You're able to spot patterns of attack as a multi-tenant based system versus you trying to be all things to security within your particular system, and you're not going to be the best of the best at doing security, proactive monitoring, all these sorts of things. So when I think of cloud security, I think of a lot of security issues being solved. A lot of people don't agree with that. They think that there's remaining on premise because of the security issues. But that's it. So if you want to have the best of breed security systems, do it in the cloud.
What does data security in cloud? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we're really securing. If security is the verb, then that's the noun that we're securing. And so information is stored in a variety of different ways. And the thing is, within cloud-based security, you have to think of it as tiers. So in other words, I can secure things at the operating system level where people can't gain access to files or physical storage systems, so they can't gain access to the data. But that's typically too binary because we're either allowing or disallowing people access to systems. And of course, we have identity access management, which actually secures people to objects or tables or relational systems. And even that's too limiting. And now we have the ability to kind of set up governance and security, down to the record and object level in the system. So, if you and I are leveraging data, I can lock you out of half the database because you don't need it. It's none of your business. I'm running an HR system. And if I'm running say you're the manufacturing person, if I'm the HR person, then I need access to people's salary information and things like that. Well, I can, through number one, data governance is involved in this, but also data security, make sure that you can't see the information that you can't see. And the other thing too is I can encrypt data using that kind of method as well. And so we have 2 different encryption keys we're leveraging, 2 different ways, and we're authenticating to the data. And you can get to a level of sophistication I don't think we were able to get to on premise. And so the data security things that I see coming down the pike, and most of these aren't widely leveraged right now. They're available in the cloud, but people aren't using them yet. Have these capabilities, which really people have been desiring for a long period of time. I mean, security has always been a pain in the neck with everybody. It's a lot of overhead. They have to go through different levels. You have to have a security administrator, things like that. And ultimately, you get frustrated with it because it's going to lock you out of things you think you need. Well, the ability to have something that's more configurable at a fine-grained level, and the ability to kind of attach any sort of security system on, and most importantly, the ability to integrate your security system with governance. So I can govern, not only limit your use of data, authenticate you to get to the data, but I can put policies around how you're leveraging the data. In other words, you can't access it at a certain time of day. That's actually a good security parameter during management and monitoring of the system. So we can proactively spot when there's issues. We can tie AI ops and AI security systems to those things as well. I mean, it just gets really, really almost sophisticated to the point that it's going to be almost 100% secure, even though it's never going to be 100% secure. But using a zero trust model and all those sorts of things are starting to move in that direction.
What's the maturity difference that you see between, say, because you've worked with startups, you've worked with enterprise as well. What do you see the difference between a security maturity between someone who's just starting off today, or a startup, which could be, I'm not saying Facebook is a startup anymore, but an internet startup, which has a lot of customers, has a lot of data, and is in the cloud, versus enterprise, which is something that has been in the data center for a very long time, has a lot of legacy applications are moving to cloud. Now, putting them like that makes them sound like 2 different worlds. But I wonder, when they go into cloud, what's the maturity difference that you see? Like, what's that maturity in your eyes?
Yeah, that's a good question, because they both have limitations and some risks they're dealing with. So startups don't have an unlimited amount of money. So they're typically always going to pick cloud, and they're typically going to do so in a way that's most economical to them. And so, back when in my CEO days, to start a company, I needed at least $1 million to get data center space and servers and things like that. Not needed anymore. You're going to spend $1,000 or $2,000 a month. So by being born in the cloud, you have the opportunity to leverage security in the best practices manner, but you're not necessarily going to do it. I find a lot of the startups don't have the security talent because they can't afford it. They can't afford a security administrator that's on the market is worth $250,000, and typically don't want to work for a startup. So they, in essence, have to kind of have people wear multiple hats and things like that. And that's where the insecurity comes in. That's where they're not configuring things correctly. I'm finding things like AWS S3 buckets are exposed because they're not even taking the defaults. They're undoing the default security set. And things, just minor things that need to be fixed, but they have the potential of having a much better security solution than anything within the enterprise. So the enterprise is limited by the fact that they have a legacy environment. And so those things typically may not have a path to any kind of sophisticated security system. They may not be able to accept identity access management. Encryption systems may have some sort of an issue with the processor that they're on. So they're limited by the physicality, or basically the degree of the technology that they've leveraged in the past. And unless they're willing to upgrade that, which by the way costs a tremendous amount of money, or move it into the cloud, for example, they're not going to reach the level of security that they feel they require. And by the way, they have plenty of money. They just can't spend it in such a way because they have to make earnings per share. And so even though they're a $50 billion company, they're still going to kind of cheap out on security stuff because it's overhead, it's, IT, and, IT is supposed to serve the business and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities there. If someone's born in the cloud, they can make their stuff extremely secure. Some things, people leveraging the enterprise, is going to be the old stuff around that's going to limit them.
That's an interesting one, because I always find this question fascinating, where is cloud security a thing at C-level? And considering you speak to a lot of people at that level as well, even something like DevSecOps, which a lot of people still cringe every time I say that. Is it something that they're talking about? Is it something that's important for them?
Yeah, I mean, look at the morning news. It's riddled with breaches and, companies that have, gone under because of some of these breaches. So it's absolutely the biggest risk, I think, that they run. It's more of a risk than an outage. If you have personal data, that's stolen and exposed. And many of these existing legacy companies that are running legacy systems, we just discussed it,
yeah,
have systems that aren't being improved. They're not being, loved by the security providers that have been loving them for many years. They're spending all their money in the cloud. And that's why you see, anytime you hear about a major breach, the cloud's never near it. It's always a legacy system. Some patch forgot to be applied. Some phishing scam occurred, or, some internal employee went rogue and, hurt them in some way. And so the dynamics of security kind of really go to not necessarily the value of the business, but they go to the business's viability. I mean, one of the things that I would do between jobs is I'd work for venture capital firms who would send me in to companies they're about to invest in, and I would do a security audit, because their biggest concern is not an outage or not them moving into cloud. Their biggest concern is about them getting breached and having the value of the company be cut in half in a day, and potentially not even recovering. And so if it's not a C-level risk issue, then I would get a new board of directors and a new CEO.
Right. And so people who are not, and I think that's a good way to explain it to people who are not convinced about cloud security being important for them, even though a lot of people still have cloud first strategy and they're all going, oh, I need a SaaS first, PaaS, and then IaaS, kind of like that kind of model. Is that something that you're noticing in your, I guess, the customers and the people that you're talking to as well?
Yeah, everybody's wants to move to the cloud. I just think they don't know they don't know yet how to do it. And so they're at the experimental stage.
Yeah.
Even though you read some of the, with 20%, 30% of migrating into the cloud, a lot of that's going to be software as a service systems, which are kind of baked into the application migration stuff. But as far as migrating systems from an operating system platform within a data center into an infrastructure as a service cloud, that's all fairly slow going. And that's because it's very hard to do that. I mean, I just put a blog in InfoWorld today that's published today. I said, just in, cloud is hard. And a UK firm kind of did a study on the fact, and lo and behold, that it's not as easy to move in the cloud as we thought. And people are kind of beyond the low-hanging fruit and trying to make the move to those systems. And so that becomes kind of the drudgery of it. So everybody wants to have a cloud-first strategy. They just don't know how to execute on it. And also the big thing is how do you pay for it? Because you have to have an accordion of money that has to hump up to spend on the migration stuff and to spend on the security and the governance and building the common services and things like that. And some enterprises are willing to do it, and therefore they're going to fall by the wayside later. Yeah, and I'm not a cloud bigot. And so when I show up, I don't go cloud, got to move to the cloud, got to move to the cloud. I mean, I'm all about making an assessment into what you have, the opportunities you have to modernize in the cloud, things you can do, such as better governance, better security, things we already talked about. And then looking at the viability of making it happen within the budget they're looking to spend, and also putting together the business case, true business case, on what they're going to gain in efficiencies, what they're going to gain in agility, what they're going to gain in cost reduction, and then kind of set it in front of them, and then they can pick out the way to go. And here's a priority order in terms of things you should move. Here's a priority order of things that shouldn't move yet. They have to move maybe in a few years. There's no platform analogs that exist in the public cloud, yada, yada, yada. It's a very complex thing to go through that kind of an architecture planning with a customer. And I think with a client, I think that's what we're missing right now. We're missing that skill inside of enterprises that aren't willing to, kind of take an academic, pragmatic look at it.
Yeah, and I mean, and I don't want to plug this in, but it's one of the reasons we have in Cloud Security Podcast, we have a cloud security awareness program. And because the more I spoke to people, even something as basic as you mentioned earlier, identity and access management, encryption, they think oh, I need like my HSM for my on-prem. And I was like, what? Why are you complex? Why the complexity? Like it's great you don't trust the cloud, but would you trust someone who's spending a lot more money than you on a data center to trying to secure it with millions of clients versus your hundreds and thousands of clients? Like, I think that it just boggles me. That's just, I was like, oh, we made a course around it, which we're making it available online. But it's really interesting to your point about the awareness of cloud and how security could be easy if you're doing cloud natively as well, that you don't have to go to outside provider. What are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious because it's almost like do you feel there's a gap in security awareness?
Security on premise
Oh,
versus the
sorry,
cloud.
I meant security awareness in cloud, like cloud security awareness.
So I think that people aren't necessarily considering all the alternatives right now, and they're just not aware of them. I mean, one of the problems is we have so much information
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's no one who's willing to kind of boil it down into some talking points and people can look at. So ultimately, it is the fact that we're hitting everything on all cylinders is going to make or break a cloud migration. It's got to be security, governance, management, and monitoring. It's got to be operational excellence. It's got to be ability to deal with DevOps, or if you want to call it DevSecOps, those sorts of things. And also an ops model change and also a talent change that exists within the organization. If you're not willing to do those 7 things, inclusive of security, but guess what? It's just a leg in the stool that's holding a lot of other stuff up. It doesn't make sense to secure something if it's going to be down, 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
Then you're typically not going to be successful, and you're going to have to loop back and fix things. And that's what I'm finding people are doing. And so they're creating solutions that are too ill-defined, not planned, and too complex. They don't have common security services. They're using different encryption mechanisms, different identity access management mechanisms. I may find 5 directories that are there, an LDAP and Active Directory and things like that. And so when they deploy it, and the reason it happened that way is because they're a bunch of DevOps pods that are in essence doing best of breed, selecting the cloud technology. And so their solution is going to be whatever they think is going to be right at the time based on their own religious beliefs. And ultimately we end up with 50 different solutions. And then also we end up with 50 different security parameters, no common security, no common directory. And guess what? We got a problem. We can't operationalize that. We can't run a security system around that. So we have to back that up and actually undo a lot of the work that's been done and put in a common security system, common governance, common directory services, and bind everything back down to those things. And that seems to be the mistake that everybody's making. So it's not necessarily having security on the radar screen. It's that they don't have a consistent common set of security on the radar screen.
Oh, right. So I guess everyone has the right intent, but they have multiple tools trying to solve the same problem.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, create a pod within an enterprise, and then we're told to come up with whatever technology solution we feel is going to be right for the application. And we're not communicating with the other 50 pods within the company that are, scrumming up and building things and doing all the things that Agile does. Then our security system, by definition, is not going to be the same as everybody else's. And then we throw it over to cloud ops to operationalize it. And guess what? They're like, we can't do this. We have 50 different security systems. We have no common mechanism here, no management and monitoring thing, no operational planning.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest hurdle that we're going over right now. I noticed that in 2019, cloud kind of plateaued a bit. When I looked into why that was occurring, mainly it's because of the complexity issue, either operationalized complexity, security complexity, governance complexity, just kind of hindering development. And people are bouncing back and redoing a lot of the stuff. And in some instances, they're mandating they can't do multi-cloud because they view it as too complex. They get back to a single cloud environment. And that actually makes things worse. Because suddenly you start taking things off the table that could be part of the common services. And we just get in this big kind of odd loop that a lot of enterprises are in right now. And I think it's probably going to be another 3 or 4 years before they get out of those loops.
I'm glad you brought multi-cloud because that's a good segue into my next question. What is multi-cloud a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Everybody, all my clients are multi-cloud clients. Of course, they may have 80% of their stuff on AWS and maybe 10% of the stuff on Microsoft and 5% of the stuff on Google and 5% of the stuff on IBM or Oracle or something like that.
Yeah.
But the acceptance of the fact that it's not going to be a single cloud provider, and really kind of looking to the fact that we're going to leverage all these different cloud solutions to really, with the battle cry of best of breed, is a real thing. And people are putting that on the radar screen. However, it doesn't around lock-in, because you're still going to get locked into a particular cloud you pick if you use cloud native features. It does add complexity. However, there's a tremendous amount of benefits from it. But you have to figure out cross-security across cloud. You have to figure out governance across cloud, management and monitoring. And then we get into cloud management platforms. We get into security managers. We get into lots of things that people didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we're going to leverage multi-cloud, and I agree that we probably should, it's going to have the best of breed stuff, then we need to have the common services that are built in and planned for. And that's where people fall down. It's the same discussion we just had, is because they kind of see multi-cloud as the way to kind of open up everything to best of breed systems. Well, what we just talked about, the scenario where we have the 50 pods within the enterprise, suddenly they're not just picking security solutions on AWS, they're picking security solutions on Microsoft and Google and IBM and Oracle. And chances are they're going to have no coordination between them. And complexity becomes 10 times as bad, as they try to operationalize it. So it's okay to go multi-cloud, and certainly you can secure multi-cloud. You can actually do a really good job of securing multi-cloud. But there has to be a significant planning effort that occurs. You have to do the meta architecture, the micro architecture, the security architecture. You have to do operational planning, and a lot of these things that just people aren't spending the time doing. So if you don't have the talent in the organization, you're not partnering with a consulting firm that knows how to do it, chances are you're going to make a big honking mistake and have to hit the reset button.
And that's interesting also to what you mentioned about managing security and governance across multiple cloud. Do you see anyone doing this well?
Yeah, there's a few. I'm not going to mention any companies, but if you look at people,
I'm curious about what does it look like? Because I would be like, a lot of people struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this as well. I know that in Australia, we have this new mandate coming up where all the banks have to go multi-cloud, and multi-cloud in the sense that if one of the cloud was considered a security risk, and the government basically tells the bank that, oh, you cannot be on AWS, you should also have Azure because AWS is a security risk. But if everyone is just on one cloud, that means, you can, I guess you don't really have any option at that point. You kind of have to shut down the bank, right?
Right.
That's why the government has basically said, oh, you kind of have to be multi-cloud or at least have another possibility. But the complexity that comes with it, it's just like insane. And to your point about money spent on it, but I'm looking at that from a security perspective. I'm like, that's even more complex. I've got on-prem, I've got AWS or possibly Azure and Google Cloud, and I'm like, where am I gonna start? I'm pretty sure it's not just me. People listening to this will ask the same question as well. Where do you start with that?
Well, you first understand the fact of the matter is that multi-cloud security is going to take 50% more resources to get up and running. And you're going to find that on pretty much everything: governance, security, ops monitoring, things like that. So you typically have to leverage some sort of security manager. You typically have to leverage security that's able to go cross-cloud and even on-premise. Identity access management systems typically are really good at doing that. And so get those configured. You have to leverage some sort of a security system that's down to the verticals that you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with healthcare and the privacy. Different countries have different regulations, different encryption standards in that. And you need to do that as a set of common services. In other words, it's not native to a particular cloud, but it may exist in a cloud, but it's a set of common services that all applications and all systems are able to leverage between all the clouds that are connected in a multi-cloud environment. That is hard to build. I mean, I've built a few of those in my career lately, and those things are really tough to pull together because everybody is going to have different requirements and different security systems on it. And the thing is to augment the security system to adapt to the needs of the application, when it should go the other way around. The application needs to adapt to the security. It has to be purpose-built for the security that's out there. But if you want good security, you can do it. It's going to cost you 50% more. I call it the multi-cloud tax, and there's a container tax as well. And you're going to have to put the planning in place to make it occur. And by the way, all these new tools that are multi-cloud enabled, typically maybe 2-3 years old. So they're not all baked. You're going to have to be very careful in testing and doing acceptance testing with this stuff. And also the public cloud you're going to pick, and leveraging those native capabilities and making sure that you're operating those things in a successful way.
Yeah, I think I love the term multi-cloud tax.
Yeah, there's multi-cloud tax. There's also a container tax. They're going to build a container application. It's about 25 to 35% more in terms of building them. So if I'm going to budget building an application that's containerized versus not, somebody that's just running cloud native and regular compilers and development and deployment stuff, it's 25 to 35% money. So because of talent, you got to hire people more expensive. It takes longer to architect if you do it properly, because really containers are distributed systems. And it's and you really should do it right out of the gate, or else you end up migrating twice. You end up migrating to a container and then having to go back and redo it, which a lot of people are getting into now. Kind of double trouble.
That's an interesting one for me, because I got this question from one of my I guess audience members, and it's important to know multi-cloud, but there's a shadow cloud happening in a lot of organizations as well. I guess multi-cloud is one complexity. Then you go into the whole shadow cloud thing where someone has whipped out a credit card and now like, I can't wait for my security to approve my AWS deployments. I'm just gonna go with my credit card. It's just gonna pay as a regular bill. Like, do you see that as a trend as well? And if yes, or how do people deal with it?
Yeah, not as much as a few years ago. I mean, we call it shadow IT here in the States, and that just means that different divisions are kind of sick of waiting for IT to get their problem solved, and they're going out and hiring their own consultant and putting AWS instance on Amex, and then go ahead and get the database and build it. You don't see that as much of an issue anymore, because I think they realized that they had to maintain it and had to secure it, and they're also liable for security of that. So that can be a fireable offense if they're putting customer information on something that's not necessarily auditable by the security systems that are there. And there's a lot of regulations in terms of how we're going to manage the data. Yep. People are typically wary of that. So people used to take risks because cloud was new, and they could, buy it, per drink, and, go ahead and basically leverage it for the technology they need to leverage, but there's too many risks to do it. A lot of what happened a few years ago with shadow IT is that people just kind of put it back on the doorstep of IT. And they said, by the way, we built this thing. It's your problem now. And so poor IT had to take it and accept it and deal with security and governance and all the things that weren't built into the system. So if people do that, I can understand why they do it, but it's not advisable. In fact, I think it should be not only discouraged, but against the policy of the company for them to start doing that. And by the way, with network sniffers and things like that, they can see it out on the network and go get it. That happens as well. That wasn't as prominent maybe 5 years ago. But I'm not seeing as much shadow IT as we did in the past. Maybe Australia, it's become an issue.
I guess my question is more around, say, not shadow IT in the traditional sense. I mean, we call it shadow IT as well, but it's more, you already have a cloud presence. Say you could be an enterprise, you have Google, Amazon, Azure, you have everyone, but there is a set of accounts or set of subscriptions your organization would be aware of. But then there are these other ones that they've signed up for themselves. It could be before cloud became a thing in your organization, and they're running this as like a BAU kind of a thing. Like that kind of shadow cloud is what I meant, where your company already has a presence in cloud, but people are not using that. They're using their own version of whatever the cloud they want to go with. Like, have you seen those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, every once in a while. So in other words, what you're saying is maybe the company's running AWS and you want to run Microsoft.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Building on Microsoft.
Yeah.
And does IT know about it or not?
Well, that's the thing. They don't know about it. That's where the shadow cloud kind of comes in.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much analogous to shadow ITs, where we're building something outside the realm and control of IT. And we did see it a lot. But like I said, people are consolidating the stuff because they realize the risk in doing that, risk of your job. If you're building data and putting data that should be regulated, you can get a lot of trouble. So you do see it every once in a while. It's easy to find out where those are using the tools and technology we have today. But it doesn't seem to be growing here in the States. Maybe worldwide it has been.
Oh, so is there technology already out there? Oh, I guess the Gatsby space, is that what you're referring to?
No, not. You're talking about network sniffers?
Oh, right now. Okay. Now I'm just wondering what kind of technology can help, because I imagine from a traffic perspective, it just looks one AWS versus another AWS, or one AWS versus another Azure, I guess.
Well, you can see people are using on the network and different ports open up to AWS that you haven't authorized and using different accounts. And therefore, it's pretty easy to spot people who are using cloud on the corporate network. Now, of course, they could go all out and run their own circuit, have
Yeah.
and a VPN and all that stuff and be stealthy about it. But I don't think people are really willing to do that now. Even though they may be frustrated with IT at certain points, I don't think they're into building their own stuff as much. At least it's not as much of a trend as it was. But we found it a ton. In fact, in many instances, that's how cloud computing grew. I mean, Salesforce.com, grew back in the early 2000s because of shadow IT, because salespeople were pulling out their credit card and signing up for a Salesforce.com account to optimize their sales process. And the IT didn't allow it, and quite frankly forbade it in many instances. But they, in essence, became such a big user base, maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, and then suddenly they just put it back on IT store. We may be seeing things like that with infrastructure as a service clouds. But hopefully they're working with IT to make sure they're moving in the right direction. I mean, my big concern about that is typically shadow cloud is not going to have an architect. It's not going to have a security administration. It's not going to have a database administrator, things like that. They're going to hire a bunch of interns to build it, maybe over a summer and put it into production. And then suddenly it gets put back on the lap of IT and they have to assimilate, in essence, rebuild this thing, which, by the way, is already in production. And therefore people are leveraging it. It's almost like changing tires on a car moving down the road.
Oh, that's an interesting one, because changing tires also makes me think of audit each time. And it's like, oh, I should check my tires every time before I leave the house. Kind of similar with cloud. Where do you see people do, I don't want to say security assessment, but maybe that's the right word for this. Do you see people do assess cloud security? And is there a framework for people who may not be doing this right now? Is there a framework that you're aware of that they can use to assess their cloud security on their AWS accounts, or whatever public environment? And how often should they be doing it?
Yeah, the Cloud Security Alliance has defined a process for assessing cloud security. I think you have to kind of take it to another level. So you're hiring a security consulting firm or even a security technology firm that has a professional service arm to go through and audit your security and do the pen testing and the white hat and the black hat stuff to see where level you're at, level of encryption, doing auditing for compliance and all these sorts of things. So it's really something you're going to assemble yourself. It's not going to be something you can really kind of get a book and go through it. You're going to have to customize it for the type of data you have, the industry that you're in, the type of systems you are, the type of clouds you're on, the brand of cloud you're on, all those sorts of things. So you can use those as kind of a main guidance, is to go through encryption checking and directory services and all these sorts of things. But you're going to have to, in essence, rely on your own expertise to create something that's going to run you through an audit. And so self-auditing is something that's it's kind of a lost art. It was you practiced a lot maybe 30 years ago, and now here we are, where in many instances we've re-centralized the data, very much like it was in the mainframes years ago, and we decentralized out on PCs and distributed systems, and now we're re-centralizing back in the cloud. So the ability to audit those systems through something that's repeatable and through tools that are able to, in essence, do the things you need to do, which are available to you, is extremely important. And I think that in many instances, it's good to hire an outside auditing firm, but you have to do some self-auditing as well. Specifically, if you're in finance or healthcare, and one of these verticals where privacy is going to be an issue, because you're going to get audited by whatever regulatory commission at one particular time. And so you have to, in essence, maintain the integrity over a long period of time and maintain the stuff. So that's a combination of you doing internal audits. That's a combination of you hiring outside security auditors, and there's a bunch of them out there that do it. And then understanding you're going to get the government coming in and auditing you. So it's lots of audits. I mean, that's kind of what, it depends on the industry you're in, but you should be prepared to have your work checked.
But CSA is a great one to start with if you're starting out today. Building your own version of using CSA as a framework, you making it, I guess, giving it your own spin based on your organization to do a self-audit.
Yeah, I mean, you would use, I mean, I would, look at the framework. It's kind of a checklist, and it's like a pre-flight checklist before you take a plane up. But the thing is, you're going to have to adapt it for what encryption services you have, identity access management. In some cases, you may not have identity access management. In some cases, it may not use a directory. You may have a security manager, which may leverage a repository. It just keeps going on forever. And then how are you going to test each one of those things and do the penetration testing, the smoke testing? All the things that are going to be, important to see how stable that environment is. And that's going to be something you have to develop yourself or hire someone to develop it. I don't think it's going to be generic things you can get from standards organizations, even though I have all the respect for, all the respect in the world for CSA and some of the other groups that are out there, and even some of the technology providers. They don't know your environment. They're just going to kind of do what I do. I mean, when I write a book, I guess at what your environment is. But if you read my book, I'm missing things you have in your organization that you have to kind of fill in the blanks. And so that becomes kind of an art unto itself that many enterprises may be lacking. We just don't have enough cloud skills people out there who know how to set these things up.
Yeah, and I think to your point,
good news, the regulatory, the auditors don't have them either, so they're not able to catch problems in many instances. But maybe everybody's dumb, but we have to get smart.
Yeah, and I think to your point, containers, cloud, this wasn't there like 20 years ago. There's not enough, I guess, runway that these technologies have had so far for it to become like, it's not like how sysadmins used to be such a common thing, and now it's almost like that field is dying in a lot of ways. And it's like it's evolving. I guess not dying is the right word, probably evolving is the right word for it. They're turning into DevOps and all these other people. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a good way to get into the next segment as well. I call it the myth buster, and the questions that I come across is more: what is the most common cloud security myth or misconception that you hear?
The cloud is less secure than on-premise. That's the
and what are people not talking about cloud security? Let's go with that.
What people are not talking about cloud security?
Yeah, like how you mentioned the tax earlier, like a multi-cloud tax. Like, what is it that people are not talking enough about cloud security? There is this general awareness that I need cloud security, but what is it? Is there something that you feel that they're not asking enough?
Oh yeah, the planning and architecture needs to go into a solid security solution. They don't talk about that. People like to lead with the tools. So I'll hear about RSA and ping identity and whatever tool the other their colleagues are using, things like that, versus actually looking at the security requirements, looking at the data, looking at where it is, looking at the locations, looking at the as-is and the to-be states. Well, that gets into a bunch of boring planning that has to occur, and a bunch of thinking, a bunch of research. But if you don't do that, I think you're going to miss the mark in providing an optimized security solution. Keep in mind that if I have enough money and time, I can solve any problem. What I'm looking to do is, in essence, provide something that's optimized, that's as optimized as I possibly can make it. So if you create a solution that works, that doesn't mean you necessarily have succeeded. That just means you created something that works that's inefficient. You need to create a solution that's optimized and get something close to 100% optimization. And that takes a lot of planning and coordination. It's almost an art form unto itself. And there's not a lot of people on this planet that are able to kind of pull that off, as I'm finding.
It is definitely an